It is lights out and away we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 60 of the HOS F1 podcast. And I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, RJ McCullough. What's up, RJ?
Hello. Coming off a great Canadian GP, or at least I thought it was really good. We got lots of topics to discuss this week, and a little pat on the back for ourselves. It was our best. Last week was our most viewed episode that we've had, so
yes, sir.
I don't know how that necessarily happened, but we'll take it. So hopefully we can repeat that this week. But I do want to hear. I'm curious because your punishment last week for the first time was that you weren't able to watch the first lap of the Grand Prix, and now there wasn't like a big crash or anything, but there were some significant things that happened. Lewis passed Alonso right away. There was some battles between, I think, Sainz and Perez. Someone went off track a little bit. So there's a few things you missed. So how was that experience for you, missing the first lap?
It was very interesting because, I sort of, like 5 minutes before the race started, I was like trying to panic and trying to think of like how long the lap was. I was like looking up the times for Quali just to see. I was like, do I wait a minute and a half? Do I wait 2 minutes? But I just ended up doing the full 2 minutes just to be extra fair. But yeah, it was tough. I think we've done some pretty funny punishments in the past, but this one felt like the first time where it was like an actual punishment where I'm like, this is like an actual negative. Like chugging a Red Bull, like that's not fun, but like I'm not actively like just sitting there like I hate this.
Yeah.
So it was a little lackluster, but as soon as the race actually turned on, it was great. Definitely the highlight of the weekend was the race for me. I think that was the case for everybody else as well.
Yeah, there really wasn't much else. Like I remember texting you on Saturday, I think, maybe Friday, just saying like, even though this is my home race, I gotta admit this is pretty shit because they had the camera issue, so we couldn't even really watch the first practice session, and then there was a lot of rain on and off, so there was it really wasn't great but then the race made up for it. We'll obviously get into that. But yeah, there was one stat I was going through Reddit because they finally brought up back the F1 Reddit. We don't have to get into all that, all this down and all that. But I saw this funny stat. So first, I guess I'd ask, who in our brief time watching F1, who do you think is the worst driver we've seen? Like maybe Latifi or Mazepin?
I would say Mazepin probably over Latifi, but those two guys are definitely in the contenders for the worst drivers we've seen on the grid. Yeah. That spot definitely could be taken. I don't think any of the rookies we've seen have necessarily done anything like so egregious that they're on those levels to where, go Tiffy or Mazepin. Yeah. I don't think it's that level yet, but as far as just this season, I would say I think just as far as like experience and skill level goes, I would probably pin that on De Vries as one of the worst drivers we've seen on the grid this season. But that's totally up for debate. He's a rookie first year, so can't be too hard on him. I think that assumption can definitely be made next year, though, if we don't really see much improvement.
Yeah, I don't think there's anyone on the grid this year that's on the level that we saw. Even Latifi, I'd agree, wasn't as bad as Mazepin. Like every race there was something, but Latifi would go off a lot, cause a lot of yellow flags. Yeah, yes. No one this year. But in terms of worst all time, let me introduce you to this man named Andrea de Cesaris. In a streak of 42 consecutive entries between the 1985 and 1988 Detroit Grand Prix, Andrea de Cesaris saw the checkered flag exactly once. In 42 races, he only finished one time. Now, I'm sure some of those were failures, but a lot of those must have been his own fault. So there's no one.
How do you keep a seat that long?
I don't know what was going on, but yeah, there's no one that bad, thankfully, at the moment.
I wonder what position he finished in. It could have been a very good one. Dude, that's just F1 for you 40 years ago, I guess, because nowadays, we're debating, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but we're debating on Checo's future. Just, 3 races, not getting to the checkered flag, just not having, super solid races, and he's made it all 3 times. So
yeah,
it's just how it shows how different a sport can change over the years.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So yeah, thankfully we don't have any of those guys on the grid anymore. But I would agree right now, DeVries is probably the worst, or potentially Sargent. But Sargent has less experience in general. He's a little younger, so I guess we can get into the talking points from the race. Since it's a few days out, we don't necessarily have to go through like lap by lap. I think everyone that is listening to an F1 podcast kind of knows what happened generally in the race, but we'll sort of cover it. Just pulling up the results from the race. But Alex Albon, I think, is the first thing we'll talk about. I mean, he won Driver of the Day, I believe, and I think we both agree that he deserved it. Not only in the race, but in qualifying. Like, whether it was him that had the call or his team, regardless, they finished P1 in Q2, I believe, because of the timing of changing to slicks or whatever it was. So just great there. And then I don't remember where they finished. He started in... Let's see here. Alexander Albon. Okay, so he started in 9th and finished in 7th. Yeah, so that's pretty impressive. 6 points. It's a lot more than he had all year by far. So really great race for Albon and for Williams. Kind of good to see them back up there. I think everyone kind of has a bit of a soft spot for Williams. They used to be an iconic team, and now they're sort of meh. So nice to see them do well. What did you think of Albon, especially with Checo not doing well? Like, considering he was the one that replaced Albon.
Oh man, I don't think Christian or Helmut are looking at Williams and being like, "Damn, we fucked up." But I do think that Albon has more than proven, that he's an extremely talented driver. The results that he's been able to get out of the Williams are honestly, I mean, they make Albon look really, really good, considering how long it took George Russell to get points in the Williams. Now, I know different cars, different seasons, different speeds, different regulations, all that stuff. But I'm just saying Albon is very, very talented, and I feel like he just continues to step up and just get the results that like Williams so desperately needs. And I don't know if, I mean, it would take a very, very special type of rookie, sort of like Max Verstappen level. Because, I mean, I don't think Albon could have gotten these results when he was a rookie, when he was first starting, in Toro Rosso at the time. But I do think that his experience is starting to like really benefit him because, he did spend a little bit of time outside of the F1 car when he got kicked out of Red Bull. But he's been able to just really, really bounce back, and seeing him actually get these results, especially P1 and Q2, I mean, you just don't see that. You're not going to ever see that. Actually, I was about to give a quiz answer away that you're going to take here in a little bit because they do bring up the Alex Albon result, and they kind of tie it back around to a previous Williams result. But that being said, very happy to see some Williams success because they've made lots of changes over the last couple of years. So any lower or midfield teams getting some points and getting some nice results is always great to see.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see. Inevitably, there's going to be a shuffle in the lineups, whether it's this year, next year, the year after, or 2026, when the regulation changes happen. So I'd be interested to see if Albon's done enough to move up to one of the bigger teams. I don't really know if there's any spots open, but he's definitely been impressive. And I know he's going against a rookie that I think Sargent was only in F2 for 1 year. I could be wrong on that. Maybe it was 2 years. But he doesn't have as much experience necessarily driving an F1 style car, but he's been very impressive. So we're curious to see that. Now, on the other hand, we can just talk about Checo finishing 6th. I mean, obviously, didn't get into Q3 again. Some of that is the team to blame, not getting him out at the right time during qualifying. But where did he start? He started 12th. So, I mean, you can't tell me that Max Verstappen starting 12th wouldn't have finished better than 6th. Like,
no
Max
way.
Probably still would have won the race. At worst, would have come second. So, I mean, this is starting to become a pattern now. It's not just a one-off. It's 3 races in a row. He hasn't made it to Q3, which even Max, I don't know if it was like a rude comment or anything, but Max even commented on how it's like tough that Sergio hasn't made it into Q3 3 races in a row. Like, I'm sure Helmut and Christian are not happy. It's not a good look for him. Like, what do you, as a Red Bull fan, what are your thoughts on Checo right now?
It's tough because I empathize with him. I mean, that is, I would say the second Red Bull seat is the most intimidating, high stress job you could potentially ask for in like any sporting athletic job. So, gotta take in all that pressure that's constantly on him into account. So I try to do that, but it's still tough because I mean he is in the undisputedly fastest car by a lot. That gap does seem to be shrinking, but him just continually to have these mistakes and to not get into Q3. I mean, he knows it's sowing doubt. I mean, we know the history of this team. I mean, they will throw a driver out before, like, as soon as they have another prospect that they think is even just like a percentage better, like it's over with, you're out. So I don't think we're gonna get like a mid-season change-up, like sort of like what happened to Gasly. But it's getting now to a point where, you know, he's got to hold that P2 position in the championship. And I do think that's a little bit of his saving grace because he started so strongly this season. I mean, we were even talking about him, how long he'd be able to fight Max for the championship. We might have cursed him because, 3 weeks later and there's no Q3 appearances. But I could definitely see... I would say that his performance so far has already had a big impact on his job position, but I mean, if it continues, he knows that every single minor thing from this point on is going to go against him, like, fully. I don't think there's any sort of filter or second chances or anything going on inside Christian and Helmut's brain, because it's rough. And as I mentioned to you, our next race next weekend is going to be in Austria at the Red Bull Ring, so it really has to come together for him. He's got to get into Q3. He doesn't necessarily have to get pole or anything, but he's got to get like a decent result just to show the Red Bull team that he's capable of that second seat. And right now, there's so many doubts swirling about that in the Red Bull camp and just on the internet. So
yeah,
I'm not sure.
I completely agree. And he's like, obviously his history and what he did, especially in 2021, is the reason why he's still there with them, but he's starting to lose the benefit of the doubt. I believe Austria is a sprint weekend as well, so he's going to have, with the new way they do sprint, he's going to have 2 shots at Quali. So if he messes them both up, even one though, even if he messes up the race Quali, like the sprint at the end of the day, it's not really going to, this year it's not really going to matter. I mean, in a year like 2021 where every point matters, those 8 points can make a big difference, but this year it doesn't really matter. So, but the race points, I mean, he's 9 points. He only has a 9-point hold on second place. Like, that would be pretty egregious if he doesn't come second place this season. And so yeah, I don't know. Well, it's becoming a talking point every week, and obviously the pressure's just going to mount. But Austria, not a very hard track. Like, it's just the most like NASCAR-like track, I'd say. It's basically a circle. It's not, but it's the closest thing to us.
It's very basic.
Circle, very basic. So no excuses there. We'll have to see how that goes. A team that actually finally had a good week, or at least good race. Some iffy things in qualifying we'll talk about in a bit, but Ferrari had, admittedly, like, I was in the boat when they stayed out for so long that, like, what are they doing? Because even the announcers were like, if they're going to have to pit at some point, they're going to drop way back, they're not going to be able to make it up, and they were waiting for a safety car that didn't necessarily come. So in the end, though, it did work out what they did, and they ended up 4th and 5th after starting a lot lower down the grid. So I mean, I think it was a good race for Ferrari. Kind of sad that it now 4th and 5th is deemed a good race for Ferrari. Yeah. But yeah, what was your take on Charles and Sainz, and just the kind of, for once they took a different strategy and it paid off?
Yeah, I was gonna say pretty much exactly what you said. Like, yeah, it was a really good bounce back for them, and just to get that consistency is definitely what they need. But it's just very sad to me that that's considered, a good result for them. Like, if Red Bull had gotten 5-6, I mean, I think that would have been, that would have been worse than what ended up happening, because regardless of what Checo got, I'm saying, like, if both drivers were not on the podium to Red Bull, that is just unacceptable. So Ferrari are just in a really, really weird spot right now. Like, we don't know if they're fourth or if they're third. They're definitely not second fastest, at least right now, but it's really just like how much of a recovery are they going to be able to make, because the first part of the season was just so bad. Charles is just, he's made a couple mistakes. He's also just been completely flatlined by his team. And Carlos also, I mean, he's got, he's been getting a lot of penalties lately, and seems like he's just been not in the right, I don't know if it's right in the headspace, just impeding other drivers. It just doesn't feel like they're on, like, they're at like 100% readiness. And that is always the case for the pit crew. They're definitely not always ready to go, but it's, at least to me, it's felt like up until this season that at least Carlos and Charles, like, if you get brought into the pits and 30-second stop, you can't do anything about that. But when it comes to the driving itself, I felt like those two guys just always had it on lock, but that is not the case this season. So yeah, this week was a great result for them, but it's like still just so disappointing, like, in the long run. I mean, I picked Charles first and Sainz second. No. I picked Charles first and Sainz third. I assumed, or I at least thought, that Ferrari would be somewhat competitive this season, but yeah, obviously that's not the case.
Yeah, you put your chips on the wrong guys, but
oh, so much.
Another mistake that was kind of unprecedented was George Russell this weekend. I don't know, he just slammed in that wall, which, I mean, yeah, we've done that, I'm sure, in the video game a million times, but we're not professional F1 drivers. He was going along well, like, he had a fourth place at the worst, locked up, and hits the wall, goes in for repairs, and then comes back out and ends up DNF anyways. But any thoughts on George Russell? I mean, there's not really much to say, but not a good week. He's fallen way behind. He's like almost 40 points behind Lewis Hamilton now.
That's wild. And it's crazy because I don't feel like George, at least on like Ferrari levels, has made like that many mistakes. There have been mistakes. He's not been totally clean this season, but yeah, I was shocked that they sent him back out in the race. I mean, I was pissed. I was like, dude, because I was thinking he's going to cause another red flag, or I guess he only caused, or no, did they red flag it when he first? Yeah, they did.
Yeah, there was a yellow flag at one point. I don't remember if it was for him or for someone else, but.
Yeah, but I was just worried it was just going to cause a red flag and delay the race, so I was just like, what are you doing? But then he actually was like getting a decent recovery drive in, made it back up to P10, but then of course they had to retire the car. So I was sort of shitting on Mercedes, saying that, they should have kept him in, not sent him back out, but I completely take that back. You always got to try and do whatever you can to try to secure some points, and props to them for giving it a shot, because it seemed like he almost had it, but the damage, like you said, just had to retire that car. But yeah, I feel like George is in a less stressful but very kind of similar situation to Lewis, where he's just the second driver to such a legendary, fantastic performer and athlete that it's got to be tough. I mean, I don't think the second Mercedes seat, Bottas obviously, wasn't given the same treatment as Gasly and Albon, but I mean, there's a lot of pressure, but he doesn't seem to let it get to him that much. I feel like he gets in his own head more so. Like in his head, he's like, I've got to get up to Lewis, and I want to get past Lewis. And even still, like previous GPs, when he's stuck behind Lewis, he's constantly trying to get him to swap positions or whatever it is. So I think where with Sergio, he's more worried about Max and like what the team thinks of him. But for George, I do think it's a little bit opposite, where they're in similar situations, but he's worried about himself. Like he's like, I want to get up there, and he can say as many times as he wants. He's like, I want to do it for the team. I want to do it for the team. But it's like, get a great result for the team. That's my George impression I was trying out. It didn't land very well.
Sounds like you're doing a Beatles impression.
Yeah, sound like Ringo Starr or something. But he just seems like like Lewis. We've seen Lewis. I mean, before 2021 and all this, like the biggest memes in F1 were Lewis memes. My tires are gone, all that type of stuff. Like, so Lewis is, a little bit notorious for that, but we've seen him make those team plays, in the past with Bottas. If it wasn't like detrimental that he got those points, he was willing to do that depending on the pace. I don't really see that in George, as far as those British Mercedes drivers go. So
certainly not.
And it's undisputed that Lewis is better than him. So I think he's got to get out of his own head and just try to, just get those results for the team, which he does do that. I'm not, fully shitting on George. I just feel like sometimes that comes across as it's a little bit more, self-serving, which they all want to win just for themselves, but you got to have the team aspect come into it as well.
Yeah, I agree. It's sort of like you said, it's a bit like, on a lesser level, but a bit like the Perez to Verstappen thing, where it's hard, I'm sure, to admit to yourself that maybe it's not even that Russell isn't like as good. I don't think he's as good as Hamilton, but he's just not at the point in his career where he's ready to win a championship. And obviously Lewis is still in that end of his that window, but he's still there. So it would behoove George to just sort of like settle for like the 4th place finish or the 3rd place finish instead of trying to make everything about himself. But that comes with time, and that's how they get there, is being aggressive and wanting to always win, like you said. So it's sort of a tough spot to be in, but maybe he'll start to learn some lessons. But the topic I'm most excited, I guess, to talk about was that we finally have a bit less of a gap. I mean, if you put the safety car in plus it was still like 15 seconds or whatever, but that's a lot less than 30 and or 25 or 20 or whatever the other races have been. And that is with Alonso lifting and coasting for a lot of the race.
Oh my God.
And then Mercedes, like, they're just put in these new things. So, there's a few things that I want to talk about. Mainly the Mercedes, excuse me, the Mercedes pace. Like, they have, it seems like whatever they've been doing is working, and they're on the right track at least. I saw a few quotes today, and they haven't been overly enthusiastic outwardly the past few months, but today one of them was from Toto, one of them was from someone else, but basically I think Toto said after the summer break they'll be able to compete for victories, and then someone else said they're one upgrade away from competing for victories. So for them to say that, obviously they know they have some good things coming down the pipeline. So that's very exciting for a Mercedes fan. You can clearly tell, like, compared to Ferrari, who was sort of standing still, whereas Mercedes, at least they're making some progressions. And then Alonso, I mean, he's extremely impressive.
Beast.
Like, you can't deny, like, that podium was unreal, especially with Nui up there when they did the actual celebration thing. But
so good.
Like, yeah, it's just exciting that the gap does seem to be closing a bit. I know it wasn't the best track for Red Bull and blah 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 blah, but it was just nice that it wasn't, like, I feel like we were one safety car or something from happening, or Alonso not, I don't know, we were close to having an actual race for a win.
For sure.
Do you think that gap is real or what?
For sure. And I feel like we were like the closest we've ever been, because if you remember, Max, it's what gives me a little bit of just hope that the season may not, I mean, this season's definitely over, but at least we can get just a little bit of a fight maybe, because, I mean, Max almost had a little bit of a shunt there at the end, like on the last like 10 or 15 laps. He just kind of pushed it too hard. So, and of course, you don't see that from Max very often. So I was like, that alone was refreshing to me to see. I was like, oh, he's not a god. He's like, he's not perfect. That's at least something.
Yeah.
But the gap, I'm very, very impressed with Aston Martin. I wish Lance Stroll wasn't in the car, because, I mean, Alonso has literally been top 3, or at least competing for the top 3 every single race this season. And Lance, to my knowledge, has never even been a contender for the top 5. So, Lawrence is definitely lining those guys' pockets, because Fernando's still complimenting Lance. He's giving him props. So is Mike Crack. So I just, it's like, how long until, the fatherly influence comes to an end? Because Aston Martin are in a position to be, I mean, they're already doing better than I think they ever have in the past, obviously, but I mean, to be up there with Mercedes and Red Bull, you're going to need both drivers. So we'll have to see what they do as far as that goes. But as far as the gap itself, I am so glad that we're seeing Mercedes get some actual results, because not too much hate to Mercedes, but it feels like, especially like last season and the start of this season, they overpromise and underdeliver so often. Yeah. Post 2021, and I feel like in like behind the scenes, like they want to experience like how it used to be, because it used to be like let's go Lewis, and Lewis would go out there and just crush. So I know they know their fans have been disappointed, but it just really has felt like Mercedes has come out and been like, this is going to happen, and then it's just been big disappointments for their team. So I'm glad that we're seeing them sort of quiet down and keep their heads down and just focus on the car. Stop promising what's going to happen. And even Lewis is now, this weekend he said, we're finally on a point to where we can start climbing. We're not there yet, but we're on the path. So that is like, we need that team to be there. We don't need them to be still talking about Abu Dhabi as fucked up as that was, or talking about what upgrades are going to come or how they're changing the car. So it finally feels like we're now in that part of the season where they're just like getting the work done, stopping with the promises. They do talk about the upgrades they bring, but at the start of the season it just felt like we were getting like the no side pods is going to be we have the best car, like all this stuff. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad to actually see some of the fruits of their labor actually harvest and let them get to reap the benefits of that. So and another thing, I'll shut up here in a second, but Christian has said after the weekend that they're already starting to begin development for next year's car. So in my head, if these teams keep grinding away at this car, that gap is going to get considerably smaller, much faster than we originally thought. But then that opens up the concern, if these teams do like what Mercedes did in 2021 and just go all in for this car for this year, and we develop it until the end of the season, then next season you're going to be just up shit creek and far behind. And if you don't actually manage to catch that up or breach that gap that's right now, it's just not gonna work out. So I mean, it's Red Bull. It's really, the card is in Red Bull's hands. So we're just gonna have to see if they're able to just walk that tightrope and keep up that gap and just continue to spread it even more. So back to you.
Oh no, it's all good stuff. I mean, I think sort of just more proof that the penalty they got for like losing some wind tunnel time and stuff like that, like isn't really going to matter. It's like they're already so far ahead that it's just not going to matter. So we'll see if other teams do that. But yeah, it's going to be interesting because there's that dual. Yes, I want Mercedes to be able to compete this year, but at the end of the day, I want them to be able to win a championship, or Lewis to be able to win a championship more specifically. So I don't know. I think Aston Martin will certainly go for it because they've never really done this before. It's a bit reminiscent of their Force India car that I think Perez won in that car, but this one's obviously better than that even. So Lawrence Stroll, I guess money does talk, but I'm just looking at the standings, and Lance Stroll 37 points, Fernando Alonso 117 points, 3rd to 8th, and I believe Mercedes, at least before the race, they were ahead of Aston Martin, but I guess George didn't get it. So Mercedes is still in 2nd place ahead of Aston Martin. Like, that shouldn't be happening with the regularity of 2nd places that Alonso's having. But is there any world in which Lance Stroll isn't on the team next year? Like, does Lawrence Stroll at a certain point, does it become about business, or is this whole thing just about his son being in a good car?
Man, I mean, I would like to think it's that he's extremely successful. He's an extremely successful businessman. So, he knows the results have to come. His interviews from Drive to Survive prove that. But he's got that family bias. So I don't know. I feel like if they were going straight or fully on business, he would have already been out. Mm-hmm. I think if there's any sort of like thought process that goes into like how can we become that next championship level team. If Lance is involved in that, I don't think it's going to happen, just because he's just never going to be at that level. And like you said, Mercedes is still second in the constructors, but I feel like I'm except this past weekend rewatching that first lap, I just feel like Alonso's always been in second this whole season, except a handful of times. So I mean, he's got to go. He's got to go. That's really how I feel. As you know, I know he's got that Canadian representation. I don't want to kick out our last Canadian. Let's replace him with a better Canadian. I don't care. I just think a better driver needs to be in there. And I could see, I really could see any of these younger guys like Lando potentially going there, Charles, if things got that bad. But that is only going to happen if they are like fully on board with getting rid of Lance, and that's probably not going to happen because I don't know, Daddy Stroll just doesn't. He's loyal.
Yeah.
Which is.
Yeah, that would be a tough conversation. One thing I wanted to mention about the gap. Do you think that bird that Max Verstappen had lodged in his wing the entire race, do you think that affected his driving at all, or I don't know?
Fuck, I hope not. That's what's causing the gap to go down.
That was weird. They didn't really talk about that much on the broadcast, but yeah, he just came on and was like, I think I just hit a bird, and then he did. He killed a bird. So add that to the list.
That sucks.
Max Verstappen, animal murderer, should be in jail.
His supporters are gonna love that.
Yeah. So a couple quick hitter questions that are like, do you think this is fair? The number one, the Alpine rear wing flap. It was flapping, bobbling around. The broadcast I was watching, they mentioned it a couple times, and they showed it, and it looked like it was going to fall off. Lando Norris from behind was like, this thing's going to fall off. Like, it's going to kill someone if it comes off. Alpine said that they knew it wasn't going to fall off. I don't know if it's designed that way or if it's just it was loose, whatever. Fair or unfair?
I don't know. I'm curious. I don't actually know the answer to this. Was it just Ocon's wing that was doing that, or was it both of the Alpines?
As far as we saw it was just Ocon, but I don't know.
If it's one of those things where something came loose, if it was still working, maybe give him a black and white flag and see if they can potentially try to just secure it a little bit better when he comes into the pits. But if it's just an engineering issue, I don't think he should have been penalized for that necessarily. But if it's like some sort of like workaround or a loophole that the team is looking into, and it's like something that they were testing out, which again I don't know the answer to that. If that is the case, then yeah, that's definitely not cool. Should not be allowed. Like Lando said, it's super dangerous, and I can't remember what the exact situation was, but Red Bull was getting like a ton of flack back in 2021 because of their wing was bouncing just like a crazy ton. And everybody was immediately like, oh, they're doing that for an advantage because it's something to do with it. I don't know. If that is the case, then yeah, for sure, cannot be allowed.
Yeah.
Because it's dangerous. But if it's just a little small issue, then I don't think anything needs to come of that. So I guess we'll see in Austria how that rear wing looks.
I guess we will. That reminded me when they're in the cool-down room afterwards, Lewis was saying to Fernando or Max, like, oh, your rear wing was, or your rear was crazy. Like, your rear was unbelievable. And then they're like, oh, your rear was nice too. It's like, I think they know what they're saying, but I don't know. Another quick, you mentioned Lando. Do you think his penalty for, it's weird that they called it unsportsmanlike conduct or whatever it was. Basically, you just went a bit slower during the safety cars so they could get a double stack in both the pit. But that's a pretty normal thing that's done all the time. Ted on the broadcast was going a little nuts, like, oh, Lando is like, that's like giving a puppy a punishment for taking a whoopsie in the park. Like, then he just kept going on. Lando is the nicest guy. He's like, okay, that's not the point here. But anyways, do you think that penalty was fair? Seems like midfield teams get treated differently than front of the pack teams. Because Lewis.
Oh yeah.
Just real quick, just remembering, like Lewis didn't get a penalty for impeding Alonso, which at first looked like a penalty. When you watch the replay, Alonso kind of played it up a little bit, but there was 2 times impeding in the pit lane that didn't get a penalty, and then that got a penalty. So, what do you think?
Gosh, was it a 5 second?
I think 5 second. I believe.
Yeah, I that's what I remembered. But I also was like, it might have been a 10, but 10, that would have been just beyond egregious. I don't think it necessarily. Yeah, I think it was a little harsh, if I'm being honest. And the unsportsmanlike. I mean, did Carlos get unsportsmanlike penalty, or was it labeled something differently?
Oh, yeah, true. I think it was labeled something differently. I've never seen unsportsmanlike before.
No. So, yeah, to me it just seemed like they were just trying to kind of like make an example out of him, and it feels like that happens a lot. And I see like that, that Family Guy thing where they hold up the skin tone chart and they're like, this level of white's good to go through, but anything like darker skin tone not allowed. But they changed it, and it's like German, Thai, or what, like all these different nationalities of drivers, and it's like penalty, and then British drivers, and it's like no penalty. But I don't necessarily think I agree with that bias because, yeah, exactly. He's a British driver. You could argue that, maybe they favorite particular drivers. I don't know if it necessarily has to do with their nationality, but yeah, I definitely think that was a harsh penalty, kind of unnecessary. And I'm sick of the FIA and the stewards making examples out of certain, like they just handpick like instances of where something happens, and then they'll give a harsh penalty, and that'll be the end of it, just to try to tell everybody else, don't do this. But if you're not handing out equal penalties for equal actions, then it's all moot. Like, it's all moot, and that's my biggest like drawback to F1. Still my favorite sport in the world. I love it more than anything. It does feel like a lot of times drivers are like almost made an example of, and it feels like a lot of drivers get taken, like they just have nothing ever bad happen to them. Like there was, I forget exactly which GP was it, but Max, it felt like he had gotten a track limit warning like 5 times over the whole GP. Like that's track limits, Max, turn 11. Like, but he never ever got a penalty, and then he finally got the whatever flag they waved to be like, this is your last warning. So it just feels like they give out a lot more warnings to, like, not even necessarily British drivers, just top level drivers, because I don't know if it's they're afraid to interfere, but like that's your job. Like that's the purpose of this institution, of the stewards and the rule book and all that stuff. So yeah, all that to say, yeah, I do think it was a little harsh, and I agree with Lando's post that he made afterwards of him saying, I'm not an unsportsmanlike athlete, which I agree with him. And yeah, it just, in a sport, in motor racing, I feel like there's much like more harsh ways to be unsportsmanlike than something like that. Something that Max Verstappen, as a Max fan, does every single safety car. And it even felt like this GP, like, it felt like the safety car was like at the end of the straight, but he was still in the middle. I'm like, dude, what's going on here? Like, but that doesn't even get noted. So it's just, it's total bullshit. Gap
went from like 1.5 or 2 seconds to like 3.5 after the safety, like during the safety car. Like that's exactly what's not supposed to happen during a safety car. So yeah, I don't know what's going on. It was strange. Another thing that was strange was, and I guess I don't really have much to say on this really, but Sainz in qualifying just blocking Gasly and everyone like multiple times. Everyone was very mad at each other during qualifying. Like there was a lot of like, fuck this guy, fuck that guy, this guy's blind, this guy's an idiot, who does this guy think he is? Like just a bunch of anger going around. But Sainz was like, and Gasly's always like a little upset about this stuff because of his friend, and also we had the incident with the tractor on track, which was crazy. But just for it to be him was too bad. But yeah, what the hell was Sainz doing? He's just blocking the middle of the path on hot laps. Very strange. Yeah, very strange.
A lot of rookie errors at Ferrari, it seems.
Yeah, they're, like I said, their heads are just not all in it. It's just a strange year for Ferrari. I'm glad I'm not a Ferrari fan, to be honest. Sorry to Tifosi, but it would be very, very tough. It's tough being a Mercedes fan, but at least they're progressing nicely. It's been a tough year or two, but so I wasn't able to watch the ESPN2 broadcast with Danny Rick. I haven't really seen much about it online, to be honest, so I'm gonna let you talk about this one. I know you tuned in for a little bit. So what were your thoughts?
Yeah,
and have you
I've
seen anything
clips
online about it? Like, what, do you think it's something that worked, didn't work?
Oh, I personally felt like it didn't work really at all. You know, it definitely felt more of like a publicity type thing, which it is. I mean, that's the only reason they do anything to get people to watch. So can't really fault them for that. It did definitely not. I mean, when they announced that, to me, it felt like, oh, Daniel Ricciardo and Will Arnett probably have some sort of relationship and wanted to do this. Also, what the hell is Will Arnett's, connection or passion or anything to F1? So, I was hoping that it would be, entertaining, but I tuned in probably, I think I started about maybe 20 laps in, and I listened for a couple of laps, and then I tried tuning back in towards the end. But I watched some clips, and it was just very odd to me. You had Daniel and Will Arnett in like completely separate buildings. I don't know if I doubt they both were there. I think Daniel was at the track and Will was broadcasting from California, which to me, regardless of your celebrity status, I mean, why not just go to the race? I mean, it's one day, one broadcast, and you're doing it 3 times a year. So the delay, there was just, it's not like Zoom or like us. There's not like a full second delay, but it's like an apparent thing. So all the technical stuff aside, there just was a very big lack of chemistry. I was expecting, honestly, when they said Daniel Ricciardo, Will Arnett, these 3 GPs, I'm sitting there thinking, we're going to have these 2 guys sort of like TNT or ESPN sitting at like a desk and analyzing things, making live commentary. But, that was kind of what they were doing, but it was more of like a passive. It was almost like if me and you were doing the podcast right now and sort of discussing sort of what was happening. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it was very low energy, and to Will's credit, he did try to continuously bring up like certain topics. Like nothing crazy happened to my knowledge. I was besides what I watched a couple of clips on Twitter. It was mostly just them like reacting to certain things that happened in the race, which was obviously the best part. And I don't know. I just don't like this forced celebrity entrance in F1. I think if Daniel had potentially been on that broadcast in person with another charismatic F1 personality, or maybe a celebrity that is a little bit more knowledgeable, not trying to shit on Will Arnett too much. I mean, he could be, from what I heard, he does seem to enjoy Formula One, but I just did not get the vibe that he was like super, super knowledgeable. I mean, he was asking, again, it could just be for the interest of the broadcast, so Daniel has a chance to like explain things and give information, but he was just asking like super, super basic questions, kind of like trying to be funny and make light in certain parts of the broadcast, and it just came off like super, super cringe to me. I did not like it. I hope they can sort of maybe get it a little bit together for the next broadcast, which is in Austin. Yeah, so hopefully it's a little bit more entertaining. I would like for the 2 of them to be able to get together. As far as like, the actual F1 commentary, it just did not compare in any sort of way to the live broadcast that you get with Crofty and Brundle most of the time. So it was definitely lackluster, a little bit disappointing. The highlight, though, I do think Daniel has some sort of a future in F1 broadcasting if he wants. His energy was a lot lower than I was expecting, because I feel like in a lot of like promo and social media stuff and Drive to Survive, Daniel just seems like this bigger than life personality, always smiling, joking around, not necessarily loud, but he's a presence. I did not really get that feeling at all. He was like so soft spoken, and I get it, he's focusing on multiple things doing this broadcast, but it was not the vibe or the energy that I was expecting at all. So for like the first time, I won't be like extremely harsh. I will tune in again, not the whole time, but I will tune in again for CODA just to see how it is. If they don't make any changes to the broadcast, though, I just don't see any reason to watch that over the actual race broadcast itself.
Yeah.
Unless you're just a huge Danny Rick or BoJack Horseman fan, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
but yeah.
Sorry, finish. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, but yeah, I would at least recommend watching some of it on the next race just to see if you like it. But yeah, to me, it just didn't seem like a necessary thing that needed to exist.
Yeah, maybe for more casual fans it would be entertaining. I don't know. The one thing I just can't wrap my brain around is how they weren't in studio in some place together. Like, so I picture it like they'd be on some desk with the like a clear thing behind them so you can see the track behind them, but it's not blocking the noise or anything. But yeah, and Will Arnett's Canadian, so it would make sense for him to be at the Canadian Grand Prix. I don't know how that didn't happen, but disappointing, I guess. But the first time of things is never really great, and F1 is not the best at implementing new things as it is. So, I mean, we'll see. We'll give him another chance. We'll give him another chance on that. So yeah, I'm gonna quickly do your punishment wheel because Max won again. If you want to,
yes, he did.
Look at the Haas League standings because
Oh yeah, let's take a look at that.
It wasn't too bad for you this week, but yeah, I'll do the punishment wheel because it's on my other computer here. I'll film it and put it in the edit. But yeah, you look at that while I do that.
Yeah, excellent. All right, so RJ's going to he's spinning the punishment wheel since, sadly, Max Verstappen is on his F1 fantasy team. It means that anytime he wins, since he's not on my team, I have to do a punishment. We explain this every week, but I feel like we get a lot of new listeners all the time, so I just want to get you guys up to speed. As of right now, all of my drivers, which are Leclerc, Perez, Sainz, Alonso, Bottas, Piastri, De Vries, Hulkenberg, Zhou Guanyu, and Tsunoda, my season total is 395 points across all drivers. And RJ, he has the rest of the grid, but real quick, Verstappen, Hamilton, Russell, Norris, Ocon, Gasly, Magnussen, Albon, Stroll, and Sargent. He has 464 points, so it's not as egregious of a gap as I was expecting, especially since he has Max Verstappen on his team. But I really took a gamble with Ferrari at the start of the season, hoping that we'd see some cool stuff from them, but they've just been nothing but disappointments. But yeah, RJ, he's got your gap is 69 points. Nice.
What a number.
Yeah, what a number.
Adrian's favorite number, favorite position. All right, moving on.
Oh, God.
I think that's about it we got for this week. Don't want to go on too long. We've been crushing F1 23. We already started our new career, so that's going well. I think we both really like it.
Oh, yes.
Save the quiz we have another non-race week coming up, so yeah, because they're not racing this week. It's next weekend, so we can save the quiz. Oh, yeah, but the wheel ended on dealer's choice. So I get to choose whatever punishment I want for you. So I'm going to have to think on that a little bit. And by next week's episode, your punishment will be delivered.
Yeah.
All right?
Damn. Shit, I'm nervous now. I'm going to have to shave my mustache or
maybe I'll
I'll
go off the board and pick something that's not even on there. Who knows?
Oh, yeah, that's I didn't even think about that too. Yeah, you can pick something that's not even on the wheel. Shit.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all I've got for this week. Any final thoughts? We got Austria next weekend.
Yeah, we've got the Red Bull Ring next. Besides that, we're going to be uploading lots of clips and additional content to our YouTube channel. God, I just stumbled up for myself. Our views have been going up a little bit, so that's been encouraging for us. Of course, we highly enjoy making the show, and being able to see some success from all of our efforts over the past year plus is really nice to see. Yeah, I just really appreciate RJ's continued help and hard work on the show. I definitely could not do anything with the show related without him. So with that being said, do whatever you can to support the show, whether that's sharing or liking or even just listening or telling somebody in person about the show who may want to get into F1 or already likes F1. just do whatever you can if you enjoy the show, because we really, 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 really do appreciate it. And yeah, just stay tuned for next week where we'll discuss Austria, or the pre-race for Austria, I guess. And we've got our F1 2023 game review coming out as well. We'll be talking about that. There'll probably be a separate upload for that in addition to the episode, so you can listen however you like. Besides that, yeah, thank you guys so much, and we will see you next week.